Valara Prime had always been a peaceful world. Its skies were bright, its oceans calm, and its people believed war was something that happened to others, never to them. For generations, the Valari had focused on trade, art, and science. Their fleets were built to carry goods, not weapons. But that peace ended when the Dravkan swarm came. The swarm did not send diplomats or demands. They came in black, chitin-covered ships that blotted out the sun as they descended. In hours, the Valari defense fleet was torn apart. In days, the enemy reached orbit. And now, after weeks of relentless fighting, they were here, at the capital itself. Commander Sael Vire stood on the balcony of the military command center, watching the horizon burn. Black columns of smoke rose from the outer districts. The sounds of artillery rolled like thunder across the city. His uniform, once sharp and spotless, was smeared with dust and soot. He knew the truth no one wanted to say. Valara Prime was lost. Inside the command room, officers worked frantically at their stations. They spoke in hushed, fearful voices. The tactical screens showed the swarm's advance, a tide of red markers pushing closer every hour. The outer wall defenses were down to 30% capacity. Ammunition reserves were almost empty. "Commander," said Ereva Tan, the young communications officer turning from her console. Her pale green skin looked even paler under the flickering lights. "The enemy breached the southern gate. Civilian districts are evacuating, but there's nowhere left to go." Sael forced himself to answer calmly. "Continue evacuation. To the inner city. Tell the guards to hold their ground for as long as they can." Ereva nodded but didn't move. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Sir, how long can we really hold?" Sael's jaw tightened. "Hours, maybe less." The Valari military had fought bravely, but bravery was no match for the swarm's endless numbers and ruthless tactics. Every fallen swarm warrior was replaced by 10 more. Every destroyed enemy ship was insignificant compared to the fleet that waited beyond the system. Still, Sael refused to surrender. "Send the final distress signal," he ordered. "Mark it as priority 1. Ereva blinked. "Again, sir? We've sent dozens. No one answered." "We send it anyway," Sael said firmly. "Someone might hear it." The young officer hesitated but obeyed. She activated the long-range transmitter, sending the signal into deep space. It carried a desperate message: Valara Prime under attack. Civilian population at risk of extinction. Immediate assistance required. When it was done, the room fell. Quiet, except for the hum of failing generators and the distant rumble of explosions. Hours passed. Outside, the swarm pushed closer. Their towering, insect-like war machines crushed through the streets. Soldiers fell back in small groups, covering fleeing civilians. Every moment bought was paid for in blood. Inside the command center, officers tried to stay busy. They updated maps, relayed orders, and monitored the evacuation routes. But in their hearts, they knew there was no rescue coming. The galaxy was vast, and Valara was only one small world. No one would risk their fleets for a doomed planet. Ereva sat at her console, staring at the star map. Her mind wandered. She thought about her family in the northern mountains. She hadn't heard from them in days. Were they alive? Were they safe? She clenched her hands to stop them from shaking. Then, without warning, her console beeped. At first, she thought it was another swarm transmission. But the signal was different, cleaner, sharper, and encoded in a format she didn't recognize. "Commander," she called, her voice trembling. "We're getting something." Sael walked over. "From who?" "I don't know. It's not Valari. Not Swarm either." She tapped her controls, decoding the signal. The translation came through in an unfamiliar, deep-toned voice. "Valara Prime. This is Colonel Marcus Kane of the Earth Defense Force. We received your distress signal. We are inbound. ETA. 3 hours. Ariva's eyes widened. Earth? Humans? Sail. Frowned. Humans? I've heard of them. Traders, explorers, small population, no major fleets, the voice continued. We are sending 3 warships. Hold your position until we arrive. 3 warships. Against a swarm fleet numbering in the hundreds. Sail shook his head. It's a fool's mission. Ariva, however, felt a spark of hope. Sir, maybe they have a plan. Or maybe they're coming to die with us, Sail muttered. But deep down, he knew they had no choice but to wait, if there was even a small chance. The next hours were the longest of Sail's life. The swarm forces broke through the inner defense perimeter. The city's great spire towers, symbols of Valari pride, were smashed one by one. Fires lit the night sky, painting everything in red and orange. Civilians crowded into underground shelters, praying for a miracle. In the command center, every sensor was fixed on the edge of the system. And then, they came. 3 human warships emerged from faster-than-light travel in a blaze of white light. They were smaller than the swarm's massive carriers, but their hulls gleamed with thick armor plating and strange angular designs that looked nothing like Valari ships. The lead vessel broadcast the same voice from before. Valara Command. This is Colonel Kane. We see your situation. We are engaging. Before Sael could respond, the human ships accelerated toward the swarm fleet. The Valari officers watched in stunned silence as the battle began. Human ships moved differently, aggressive, unpredictable, almost reckless. Instead of forming a defensive line, they darted between enemy formations, targeting key swarm vessels with precise bursts of weapons fire. Their cannons tore through chitin armor. Their missiles struck with deadly accuracy. They're winning, Ariva whispered, disbelief in her voice. Sail didn't answer. He was too focused on the tactical feed. The swarm ships, so disciplined before, were breaking formation, chasing the human ships in frustration. But the humans were faster, slipping away before the enemy could land a hit. Then, something even stranger happened. The smallest human ship broke away from the others and dove straight into the heart of the swarm fleet. They're insane, one officer said. Or they know exactly what they're doing, Sail replied. The lone human ship vanished from Valari scanners as it disappeared, behind enemy lines. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, enemy ships began exploding, one after another, as if their command systems had been targeted. The swarm's advance faltered. Ariva turned to Sail, her eyes wide. Sir, maybe defeat isn't inevitable after all. Sail didn't smile, but for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to hope. The enemy's advance slowed, but the battle was far from over. Commander Sael Vire stood in the center of the Valara Prime command room, staring at the tactical screens. The human warships danced like predators among the swarm's massive formation, striking with speed, vanishing and reappearing to strike again. Each blast from their weapons left another enemy ship crippled or drifting. Still, Sael knew the swarm had numbers on their side. 3 ships won't hold them forever, he muttered. Ariva Tan, her fingers flying over her console, suddenly called out, Commander, the lead human ship is hailing us directly. Put them through, Sail said. The main screen flickered, and a human appeared. His hair was streaked with gray, his face weathered, eyes sharp. He wore a dark military uniform with an insignia the Valari did not recognize. This is Colonel Marcus Kane, Earth Defense Force, the man said. His voice was calm, almost casual, as if the hundreds of enemy ships outside didn't worry him. We've studied your situation. You've been fighting bravely, but you're doing it wrong. Sael bristled. Wrong! We've been outnumbered, 100 to 1. We have no choice. There's always a choice, Kane interrupted. I need full access to your sensor data. Enemy troop positions, ship movement patterns, everything you've got. Eriva glanced at Sael, unsure. Sir, if we give them full access, they'll see all our weaknesses. Sael studied the human for a moment. The man's expression didn't change. His gaze was steady and unflinching. Finally, Sael said, "Send it." Within minutes, the human fleet changed tactics. The two larger ships formed a tight formation, holding the swarm's attention with heavy fire, while the smaller vessel vanished, again from sensors. The swarm reacted exactly as before, chasing breaking formation. But this time, their movements were predictable. They're hurting them, Sael realized aloud, driving them into open space away from the city. Eriva's console pinged again. Colonel Kane requests a secure voice channel. Sael nodded. Open it! Kane's voice came through the speakers. Commander, here's what's going to happen. My ship will make a path for your civilians to escape. But that's not enough. You need to hit them on the ground. Hard, so they pull forces back from the city walls. Can you mobilize anyone still breathing? Sael hesitated. Our soldiers are scattered, many are wounded. Then use anyone who can hold a weapon, Kane said. We'll drop equipment and instructors. We've done this before. The line went silent. Sael exchanged a look with Eriva, a mixture of disbelief and something else. Hope. An hour later, the humans made their first ground drop. From the Valari military landing pads, Sael watched the sky blaze as three dark shapes descended through the smoke. They landed with precision, their engines kicking up clouds of dust and ash. The hatches opened, and human soldiers stepped out. They moved like a single machine, weapons ready, scanning the area, covering each other with perfect coordination. Their armor was different from Valari gear, heavier, with strange angled plates and built-in visors that glowed faintly blue. One soldier approached Sael. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and his voice carried command without shouting. Colonel, Kane sent us ahead. We're here to train your fighters and push the swarm back from the city. Sael led them inside the command center. Eriva joined them, trying not to stare too openly at the humans' gear and weapons. How many of you are there? She asked. 40, the soldier replied. More than enough, Sael frowned. 40 against thousands? The human smiled faintly. 40 experienced soldiers. We'll show you the difference. Training began immediately. In an abandoned cargo yard near the Besapa city's heart, human instructors gathered Valari volunteers, soldiers, civilians, even dock workers, and began drilling them. They showed them how to use new weapons, compact rifles that fired rapid bursts of plasma, grenades that could melt through swarm armor, and explosives that fit in the palm of a hand but could bring down an enemy walker. The Valari struggled at first. They were used to ceremonial weapons, not battlefield tools. But the humans were patient and relentless, correcting mistakes without hesitation. Again! Barked one instructor. Cover your partner, move forward, fire in short bursts. You're not trying to scare them, you're trying to kill them. Eriva, assigned as a liaison, watched in awe. In hours, the Valari began moving like a coordinated unit. It wasn't perfect, but it was something they had never achieved before. Meanwhile, Colonel Kane himself arrived on the surface. He met with Sael in the command center, spreading a holographic map on the table. We've identified their command relays here, here, and here. Destroy those, and their ground troops will lose coordination. Sael leaned over the map. They're deep in occupied zones. Our people can't get that far. Kane tapped the side of his visor, bringing up a small tactical display. They can with us leading. The first strike happened at dawn, under cover of heavy bombardment from the human ships in orbit. Mixed squads of humans and Valari fighters slipped through the ruined streets. The swarm's forces, used to the Valari's cautious retreats, were caught off guard by the sudden, precise attacks. Plasma fire lit up the alleys. Swarm warriors screeched as explosives ripped through their lines. Valari fighters moved faster now, trusting the humans' instructions, hitting and fading before the enemy could react. By midday, the first command relay was destroyed. By nightfall, the second was gone. The swarm's attack patterns became sloppy, their coordination breaking down. From the walls of the inner city, Sael watched the change with something close to disbelief. They're actually falling back. Hereva allowed herself a small smile. Colonel Kane said we could do it. Sael glanced at her. And you believed him? I do now, she said. But the humans weren't celebrating. In the temporary camp near the command center, Kane stood over a holomap, studying the swarm's movements. They're not beaten, he told his officers. This was a probing force. The real wave is still coming. How big? One of his lieutenants asked. Kane didn't look up. Big enough to finish this planet if we don't stop them first. His eyes moved to the edge of the hologram, a massive red cluster moving toward Valara Prime from deep space. That night, the Valari saw the truth for themselves. The swarm reinforcements arrived. From the observation deck, Sael, Hereva, and Kane watched as the sky filled with enemy ships. They blotted out the stars, their hulls gleaming in the reflected light of Valara's burning cities. The numbers were overwhelming, triple the original force. Hereva's voice was barely a whisper. There's no way. Kane didn't flinch. There's always a way. He turned to Sael. Get your people ready. The real battle starts now. Sael stared at him. Against that? Even you can't. Kane's mouth curved in a faint, almost dangerous smile. Commander, you've seen what we can do with 40 soldiers. Now imagine what we can do when the stakes are life or death. Outside, the swarm fleet began its slow, inevitable descent toward the planet. Inside, human soldiers prepared weapons, checked armor, and planned for a fight that would decide not just Valara Prime's future, but whether the humans would live up to the hope they had inspired. For the first time since the war began, the Valari did not feel like victims waiting for the end. They felt like fighters, and it was because of the humans. The swarm fleet hung above Valara Prime like a storm that would never end. Their ships moved slowly but with purpose, positioning themselves for a final strike. On the ground, the constant drone of enemy engines filled the air, a reminder that destruction could fall from the sky at any moment. Commander Sael Vire stood beside Colonel Marcus Kane on the roof of the Valari Command Center. From here, the ruined city stretched in every direction, broken towers, collapsed streets, and the orange glow of fires that refused to die. They'll hit the capital within the next cycle, Sael said quietly. Not if we hit them first, Kane replied. His tone was calm, almost too calm for the situation. We can't wait for them to choose the time and place. We take that choice away. Sael frowned. You mean a direct attack? Against that many ships? Kane didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned and looked toward the human landing zone where his soldiers were preparing. They moved like a well-oiled machine, checking weapons, loading supplies, briefing the Valari volunteers they had trained over the last 2 days. It's not about hitting all their ships, Kane finally said. It's about hitting the right ones. An hour later, the plan was laid out in the command room. A holographic projection of the swarm fleet spun slowly over the table. Kane pointed to several large vessels near the center. These are their hive control ships. They keep the swarm coordinated, share targeting data, and control reinforcements. Take them out, and the fleet loses its precision. They'll fight like a mob instead of an army. Sael crossed his arms. And how do you plan to destroy them? Our weapons can't even pierce their shields. Kane smiled faintly. Ours can. But to get close enough, one of my ships needs to break through their defensive screen. That's suicide, Sael said, Kane's gaze didn't waver. Not suicide. Distraction. The next cycle began with the humans making their move. The smallest human warship, the Saber, launched from orbit, accelerating straight toward the thickest part of the swarm formation. Enemy ships turned to intercept, filling space with beams of green energy and bursts of plasma. The Saber rolled and weaved between the blasts, never slowing down. In the Valari command center, officers stared in disbelief as the human ship dove deeper into the swarm's formation, vanishing from long-range sensors. "Where did they go?" Ereva asked. Sale could only watch the empty section of the tactical display. Either they're gone, or they're exactly where they want to be. Meanwhile, on the ground, Kane led a mixed force of human soldiers and Valari fighters into the ruins of the Southern District. Their goal was one of the swarm's planetary command relays, a towering spire of alien metal and pulsating organic material surrounded by thick enemy patrols. Kane crouched behind a collapsed wall, scanning. The target through his visor. "They've reinforced it. We'll need a split assault. Team 1 draws their attention. Team 2 plants the charges." Sale, who had insisted on joining the operation, gave a grim nod. "Valari will lead the distraction." Kane glanced at him. "You're willing to take the dangerous part?" Sael's voice was steady. "It's our planet. If we're going to fight for it, we can't hide behind our allies." Kane gave a short nod of approval. "All right, on my signal." The battle erupted with sudden violence. Valari fighters, supported by 2 human gunners, charged from cover, unleashing a barrage of plasma fire. Swarm warriors screeched and surged forward, their insectoid limbs clattering on the broken streets. While the enemy focused on the noisy assault, Kane's team slipped through the shadows, moving fast and silent toward the base of the command spire. Human soldiers planted explosives in key structural points, while Valari volunteers stood guard, cutting down stray swarm patrols before they could sound the alarm. "Charges set," reported one of Kane's men. "Good," Kane said. "Fall back." The teams regrouped just as the first explosion ripped through the alien structure. The command spire shook violently, its organic cables snapping, its glowing nodes dimming one by one. The swarm troops on the front lines staggered suddenly, unsure, their movements less coordinated. "That's one down," Kane said. "2 more to go." Up in space, the Saber reappeared on Valari sensors, right in the middle of the swarm's core ships. Its weapons fired in every direction, targeting the hive control vessels Kane had identified earlier. One by one, they began to fail, their shields collapsing under precise human fire. But the swarm wasn't going to let the Saber escape. Dozens of enemy ships turned on it, pouring fire into its hull. The small warship shuddered and spun, its armor glowing red-hot under the relentless assault. Ereva's voice cracked over the comms. "They can't take much more!" "They don't have to," Sale replied grimly, watching as the last targeted hive ship erupted in a chain of explosions. The change was immediate. Across the battlefield, swarm forces began to move erratically. Units fired at the wrong targets, or wandered out of formation. Some even collided with their own ships. Kane didn't waste a second. "All units, push forward! Break them before they recover!" Human and Valari fighters surged through the streets, striking at weakened enemy positions. Resistance was fierce, but without coordination, the swarm could not mount an effective counterattack. By nightfall, the humans had secured half the city and driven the enemy back to their original landing zones. But victory came with a cost. In the medical section of the command center, Sale found Kane sitting on a cot, his armor dented and scorched. A medic was patching a deep cut along his side. "You were injured," Sale said. Kane shrugged. "Comes with the job." "You saved the city," Sale said quietly. "If you hadn't come," Kane cut him off. "Don't thank me yet. This was just one battle. The swarm will regroup, and when they do, They'll come harder than before. Sale looked at him for a long moment. Then we'll be ready. Kane gave a small smile, the first real one Sale had seen. That's the spirit. High above Valara Prime, what was left of the swarm fleet began to pull back, retreating to the dark side of the planet to regroup. But in their shadow, an even larger vessel loomed, a monstrous shape that dwarfed the others. When Ariva saw it appear on sensors, her hands froze on the controls. "Commander? Colonel? We have a problem." Kane walked to her station and studied the readings. His expression darkened. "That's not just a ship," he said. "That's a hive mothership. And if it's here, they're getting ready for the final strike." He turned to Sael. "We're going to have to go inside that thing and blow it apart from the inside." Sael stared at him in disbelief. "Inside? That's madness." "Maybe," Kane said, "but it's the only way to win." The hive mothership was unlike anything the Valari had ever seen. It hung in orbit above Valara Prime like a dark moon, its surface a patchwork of black metal and living chitin-covered growths. Massive spires jutted out at odd angles, glowing, faintly with a sickly green light. It was not simply a ship. It was alive. From the command center, Commander Sale Veer stared at the holographic projection. "It's the size of a small continent," he said quietly. Colonel Marcus Kane stood beside him, arms crossed. "That thing controls the entire swarm here. Kill it, and the rest of the swarm falls apart." Sale gave him a doubtful look. "You say that as if it's easy." Kane's tone was grim. "It's not. We'll have to board it, fight through whatever horrors they've got inside, plant demolition charges, and get out before it blows. If we fail, Valara Prime won't see another." Sunrise. Preparing the mission in the human camp, soldiers prepared for what would be the most dangerous mission of their lives. Weapons were cleaned and reloaded. Armor was reinforced with extra plating. Explosives were carefully packed and labeled. Valari fighters, now far more confident after fighting alongside the humans, volunteered without hesitation. They had learned to fight in the ruins of their own city. Now they were ready to carry that fight to the stars. Kane stood before the assembled team, 20 human soldiers and 30 Valari volunteers. His voice was firm but clear. "This isn't a rescue mission. It's a kill mission. The swarm won't let us just walk into their queen's home. They'll throw everything they've got at us. But we're going in because the alternative is worse. If that mothership stays in orbit, every man, woman, and child on this planet dies." He looked around at the faces watching him. Some were calm, some afraid, but all determined. "We get in, we set the charges, we leave, and we end this war." The approach. The infiltration team boarded 2 stolen swarm transport pods. Small, organic-looking craft captured during earlier battles. Human engineers had reprogrammed them to fly toward the mothership without being shot down by automated defenses. Inside the pod, the air was hot and smelled faintly of chemicals. The walls pulsed like muscle, and the floor felt damp under their boots. Valari fighters shifted nervously, unused to traveling inside something that seemed half alive. Sale sat opposite Kane. "Are you sure this will work?" Kane gave him a faint smirk. "Not even a little, but it's the best shot we've got." The ride was silent after that. Through the small forward view slit, the mothership grew larger and larger until it filled the entire view, a monstrous alien fortress. Boarding the hive, the transport pods slid into docking cavities on the mothership's outer surface. The walls sealed shut behind them, trapping them in darkness. "Breach in 3, 2, 1, Kane barked. The humans blasted open the pod doors with explosive charges rushing into the hive corridors beyond. The Valari followed close behind, weapons ready. The interior of the mothership was worse than anyone expected. The walls were made of a black-ribbed material that shifted slightly as if breathing. Strange fluids dripped from the ceiling. The air was heavy and damp, making every breath feel like it carried something alive. They didn't have long to take in the view. The swarm's defenders were already coming, fighting. Inside the beast, the first wave of swarm warriors charged. Down the corridor, their claws clicking against the floor, their eyes glowing red in the dim light. The humans opened fire, plasma bolts cutting down the front ranks. Valari fighters used their new training, moving in pairs, covering each other as they advanced. Kane's voice was calm over the comms. "Push forward! We don't have time to clear every room. Just get to the core!" They fought through twisting corridors, up pulsating ramps, and across vast chambers where strange alien machinery hummed and pulsed. Every step forward was paid for in blood. At one point, they reached a narrow bridge over a pit filled with writhing, insect-like larvae. Swarm shooters appeared on the far side, pinning them down. Sale grabbed a grenade from his belt, pulling the pin and tossing it in one smooth motion. The blast threw the shooters off the bridge, their screams fading into the depths below. Kane gave a quick nod. "Nice throw, Commander." The Queen's Guard, finally, they reached the outer chamber of the hive core. Here, the resistance was strongest. Massive warriors with thick armor and heavy clawed limbs blocked the way. These were the Queen's Guard, larger, faster, and deadlier than anything they had fought before. The humans focused their fire on weak points in the armor, while Valari fighters moved to flank them. The battle was brutal and close quarters, with plasma bolts, bladed weapons, and claws flashing in the dark. One Valari fighter was caught in the guard's claws, but a human soldier dove in, jamming a blade into the creature's neck joint. The guard collapsed, twitching. Kane's voice came over the comms, hard and sharp. "We're almost there! Push through!" Face to face with the Queen, they entered the hive core chamber, and there she was. The Swarm Queen loomed over them, her massive body half fused with the walls, her multiple eyes glinting in the dim green light. She was monstrous and regal, her voice a low hiss that echoed in every mind. "You dare invade my home?" Kane didn't hesitate. "Plant the charges. Keep her busy!" The Queen tore herself free from part of the wall, moving faster than something her size should. Her claws slashed through the air, forcing fighters to scatter. Energy blasts from her bioweapons seared holes in the floor. Sale and two Valari fighters poured fire into her legs, trying to slow her. Kane charged forward, firing his rifle into her face at close range before diving aside to avoid a crushing blow. Explosives were set around the chamber, on structural supports, alien machinery, and near the Queen herself. No way out, charges set. A human soldier called. "Fall back," Kane ordered, but the Queen was between them and the exit. Her body blocked the entire corridor, and she wasn't letting them go without a fight. "We'll never make it past her," Sile shouted. "Yes, we will," Kane said, pulling a grenade from his belt, "because she's going to be too busy with me to stop you." Before Sile could argue, Kane charged straight at the Queen, firing every weapon he had. The team ran, dragging wounded with them as the Queen's roars shook the hive. Behind them, Kane fought like a man possessed, dodging claws, blasting at eyes, striking at weak joints. Finally, with a roar of pain, the Queen struck him, sending him crashing against the wall. But in that moment, the rest of the team was clear. The escape sale's voice came over the comms, urgent. "Colonel, we're out! You have to go!" Kane, battered and bleeding, staggered toward the exit. "On my way!" The team raced through the hive corridors, alarms blaring as the demolition charges counted down. Swarm warriors poured in from all sides, but the humans and Valari cut them down, refusing to slow. They reached the transport pods with seconds to spare. The pods blasted away from the mothership, diving toward Valara Prime. The end of the hive from the surface. The Valari looked up and saw the hive mothership shudder. Bright light burst from its core, and then the entire structure ripped apart in a massive explosion. Chunks of burning debris fell into the atmosphere, glowing as they burned up. Cheers erupted across the city. The swarm forces on the ground began to falter, their movements chaotic, their attacks collapsing. Without the Queen's control, they were no longer an army, just scattered creatures trying to survive. In the command center, Eravatan's voice was filled with awe. They did it. They actually did it. Sael, covered in dust and blood, stood beside her. "No," he said quietly. "We did it. Together." But there was one question still burning in his mind. He turned to the medics tending the survivors. "Where's Colonel Kane?" The explosion shook the mothership like an earthquake in space. Flames burst through the alien corridors, burning and tearing apart the walls that were alive just moments ago. Colonel Marcus Kane could feel the vibrations under his boots as the charges began to go off one after another. The entire place was dying, and he was still inside. The Valari fighters were shouting over the comms. "Colonel, the Queen is still blocking the escape route. We can't reach the exit." Kane gritted his teeth. "Then we make our own way." The Swarm Queen stood ahead like a nightmare made of steel and flesh. Her body was covered in black, armored plates, her many limbs sharp like spears. Her eyes glowed a deep red, and the way she moved made every Valari nearby take a step back. The Queen let out a piercing screech, and hundreds of smaller swarm creatures poured in behind her. "Hold the line!" Kane roared. The humans and Valari fighters formed a defensive wall. Bullets, plasma blasts, and explosive charges lit up the alien hall. Valari, who had been farmers weeks ago, now fought like warriors, their fear replaced with rage. They remembered. Their homes burning, their families running, and they refused to give ground. The Queen charged, smashing into the defenders. 2 Valari were knocked aside, their armor cracked. Kane leapt forward, firing his rifle directly at her eyes. One shot hit home, and the Queen screamed in fury. Her massive claw swiped at him, and he was thrown against the wall, his armor taking the impact, but leaving him breathless. "Colonel!" Sergeant Reeve, one of Kane's most trusted soldiers, pulled him up. "You can't take her head on!" "I'm not trying to," Kane said, grabbing a plasma grenade. "I just need her to look at me." The Swarm Queen turned, her focus now fully on Kane. She lunged forward, but Kane rolled to the side, sliding under her. He slapped the grenade against the soft joint under her main body and rolled away. "Fire in the hole!" he shouted. The blast tore into her armor, green blood spraying across the hall. The Queen staggered, but she wasn't dead yet. The smaller swarm creatures grew frantic, attacking without thought. Valari and humans fought side by side, the corridor turning into chaos. "Charges are about to go." Ereva's voice came over comms. She was still back near the infiltration point, watching the timer. "You have less than 3 minutes." Kane wiped the sweat from his brow. "We're finishing this." He grabbed a fallen Valari's spear-like weapon, one made from scavenged swarm parts, and charged the Queen. She lashed out again, but this time Kane dodged and drove the weapon deep into the wound from the grenade. The Queen screamed so loudly that even the walls seemed to shiver. "Now!" Kane shouted. Every fighter poured fire into the Queen. Plasma, bullets, energy blasts, all of it struck at once. The Queen's body convulsed, then collapsed with a heavy thud. The swarm creatures froze, their coordination breaking instantly. Some turned and fled, others simply collapsed. "She's down!" Sergeant Reeve called out. "Move!" Kane ordered. "We're out of time!" They ran through the collapsing corridors. Alien fluids dripped from the ceiling. The floor cracked under their boots, and the sound of explosions followed them like thunder. The mothership was tearing itself apart from the inside. As they reached the final airlock, a massive shockwave ripped through the ship. The blast threw them into space, but their suits sealed instantly. Small emergency boosters activated, guiding them toward the extraction shuttle waiting just outside. Inside the shuttle, Valari and humans collapsed into their seats, breathing hard. Kane sat at the front, watching through the viewport as the mothership turned into a ball of fire. The explosion lit up the darkness, sending debris in all directions. The swarm fleet, without their queen and command ship, scattered in confusion. Valari defense ships began chasing them down, destroying or forcing them to retreat. "It's over," Sail's voice came over the comms from Valara Prime's surface. His tone was one Kane had never heard before. Hope. "Colonel, you saved us." Kane leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. "We saved you. Together." The aftermath, when the survivors returned to Valara Prime, the entire planet seemed to come alive with celebration. Banners flew in the streets, music echoed from every city, and the Valari people lined up to greet their heroes. Commander Sail met Kane at the landing platform. The normally calm and composed Valari leader actually smiled. "On behalf of my people, I thank you. You have given us back our home, our future." Kane shook his hand. "You did your part too. Without your people, we couldn't have done this." Nearby, Ereva watched silently. She had been the one to send the distress call. She had believed, for just a moment, that no one would come. But the humans had arrived when no one else dared to. Now she stepped forward. "Colonel Kane, I will never forget what your people did here." Kane gave a small nod. "We just don't like bullies." A new alliance weeks later, the Valari and humans signed a defense pact. Valari engineers began working with human military advisors, upgrading their defenses and ships. Human soldiers trained Valari troops in strategy and tactics, while Valari scientists shared technology that Earth had never seen before. The galaxy took notice. Many alien races who had feared the swarm now saw hope. Rumors spread that humanity was not just another species. They were the fighters who turned impossible defeats into victories. The final patrol one evening, Kane stood aboard the HSS Resolute, watching Valara Prime from orbit. The once besieged world now glowed with life, cities shining brightly under the stars. Sergeant Reeve walked up beside him. "You think the swarm will try again?" Kane's gaze hardened. "They'll try somewhere. Bullies always do. But they'll think twice before coming here." Outside the viewport, human and Valari ships patrolled side by side. It was a sight that told the galaxy one thing. Some battles are lost before they begin, but not when humans are involved.